Unfortunately, this is not going to feature zombies, and because it is the Electoral College, it might be rather boring, so I'm sorry about that, but I do find it very interesting and informative, so hopefully you guys will come away from here learning something new. So to counterbalance that, I asked Oliver Salk to make a video for us, so we can start off with a little bit of information from a video.
I think it's a convoluted form of democracy wherein the popular vote is disregarded.
I learned about it in Gov class.
I mean, it makes the popular vote not really matter at all.
What do you think of the Electoral College?
I don't even know what the Electoral College is.
I think it's not perfect, but it does help protect the small states.
Got Bush elected.
You mean the thing that gave Bush the presidency?
What do you think of the Electoral College?
I think it's important for checking the public opinion of the time in case there's an overwhelming lean toward one side. Maybe it offers the country a different view.
I'd say that the Electoral College is needed to, in a sense, determine elections. Because, I mean, the alternative is an ignorant majority of the United States of America.
So I think that when our nation was founded, the Electoral College most certainly served a purpose, but nowadays it might seem somewhat outdated. And also, I think a lot of people in general are confused by it, and why we have it still today.
What do you think of the Electoral College?
Oh, I love the Electoral College. I'm thinking of applying AD.
Electoral College, I think it might need to be reformed, although I was pretty happy when it turned out that President Bush won the Electoral College and Al Gore won the popular vote, so it worked in our favor that time. But I think it doesn't really represent America as a whole, and it should be, it's a little outdated.
I think that it should be updated because if the people don't have a voice in democracy, then it's not a democracy.
Yeah, I think it's a flawed system because democracy should be run by the people for the people, and when the popular vote is choosing one president and the Electoral College is choosing a different president, it's not by the people for the people.
I think the Electoral College is a bizarre Byzantine system to elect a president that nonetheless preserves our federal system.
Or what do you think of the Electoral College?
I think it's outdated.
I don't really know much about it. Tell us more!
So, Brooke and Eliza, I am happy to tell you all more about the Electoral College. Some of you guys have some good ideas about it. Some of it is not necessarily correct, so hopefully you'll come away with this with a little bit more understanding. Okay, so why do we have the Electoral College? The original plan of the framers at the Constitutional Convention was they wanted to have Congress select the president, much like they do in a parliamentary system, but they decided that they worried the president would be too beholden to members of Congress, and so at the very last minute, they came up with the Electoral College. There are some people who think they ran out of ideas, and this was a last-minute ditch effort to try to come up with a solution. And it was, of course, a compromise, which is the basic understanding of our government, the way it's supposed to function. They also wanted it to be a check on the voters because the framers really didn't trust the public. They weren't sure that the public would be able to make the best decision at that time because of lack of information, lack of education. And one of the things you have to think about in 1787 when they're writing the Constitution is there's no Twitter, no Facebook, no TV, very limited means of communication and transportation. There were lots of newspapers, but that was about it. So the framers worried that the general public wouldn't have the best information on the candidates, and that if you had a select group of electors who were informed, they could make an appropriate choice for who the President of the United States would be. So they felt it was important to have indirect election. And they thought that the electors would be independent. Of course, what ends up happening is the electors are now completely beholden to parties, so it doesn't work the way the framers intended. So these are the men at the Constitutional Convention. It took place in the summer of 1787 in Philadelphia. It was very hot that summer. And as you can see, they're all wearing wool jackets, wool socks. My theory is that they were just really hot, really tired, and really just absolutely fed up with being in Philadelphia and came up with this system and then got the heck out. Okay, so how does the Electoral College work? On Election Day, on Tuesday, when you go and vote, if you vote, you're actually voting not for the President of the United States, but you're voting for a slate of electors. Once all those ballots are counted on Election Day, the number of electors, who wins them, is determined by who wins the state. So if you win a state, you win all of the electors. I should say the presidential candidate wins all of the electors from that state. And it's based on what's called a plurality vote. So whichever candidate gets the most votes in a state, it doesn't have to be a majority, which would be 50 plus 1. It could just be the most votes. So whoever wins the most gets all the electoral votes for that state, with the exception of Maine and Nebraska, and they do a different system that's based on proportionality. So it's then the electors who are actually voting for the president, and this doesn't happen until the Monday following the second Wednesday in December. So when people go and vote on Tuesday, that election happens, it'll be over, they'll count all those ballots, but then the electors don't meet until December in their respective state capitals. And in Connecticut, there's actually a really cruel procedure where the electors go and they meet in the state capitol in Hartford, and they have paper ballots, and they put the names down on the paper ballot, and they put it into a ballot box, which was made out of the charter oak tree. The charter oak tree was the tree that was in Hartford that during the Revolutionary War, the colonists hid the Connecticut state constitution in that tree, afraid that the British would find it and destroy it. And if you notice on our license plate, we're the Constitution state. So the ballot box is made out of the wood from that tree. Okay, so the electors, a lot of people ask how they get their job. They're chosen by their parties. So they're active people in the Democratic and the Republican parties. So they're going to be loyal to their party. Okay, so the winner, who is the winner? We actually do not know that until January, officially, when Congress, they count all of the ballots. This is the actual ballot box that is in Congress in the United States Senate. It's made out of mahogany. So all 50 states send their electoral college ballots to Congress. They get put in this box, and then it's counted. And so the president is not officially elected until January of 2013. Okay, some more details about how it works. There are a total of 538 electors. Every state gets, the number of electors they get is based on how many representatives they have, plus 2 for their 2 senators. And to win, that means you need a majority, which is 270. And the District of Columbia gets 3 electoral college votes. So this is a map of the, okay, I can't open it, so I won't show you, but you can see on the map that states like California have a sizable amount, 55, Florida, Pennsylvania, New York. Obviously, states that are really highly populous have really large numbers of electoral college votes. Okay, so what is good about the Electoral College? It gives small states a say. If you win a significant number of small states, that really adds up. And Mitt Romney will probably win a lot of small states, which will be part of his overall total. It provides legitimacy for the presidency, and it provides a majority victory. Because as I said, the actual vote totals only has to be a plurality in the state, but you have to win a majority. You have to win 270 electoral college votes to become president of the United States. Okay? You can have a situation that happened to Bill Clinton in 1992 where he did not win a majority of the popular vote. He only got 43%. We had a third-party candidate that year, Ross Perot, who got 19% of the vote. But he got 370 electoral college votes, so he won an overwhelming majority in the electoral college. It also maintains the two-party system, which could be either good or bad, depending on how you feel about that. But one thing I think it's really important is there'd be no nationwide recount. Everything's done state by state, and would not be a national election. Okay, so what are some of the problems with the Electoral College? The safe states get ignored, and the swing states get all the attention. So if you guys live in a swing state and you've been home, you've seen ads, maybe Mitt Romney and Barack Obama have come to your state, but if you live in a safe state like Connecticut, there's no advertising, there's no campaigning, and our issues that are important to us in New England are ignored by the presidency. by both presidential candidates. They talk about what's important to Ohioans, what's important to Floridians, what's important to people in Colorado, and those issues may be different than, how we feel here in the state of Connecticut or in California or Texas, for example. So according to some estimations, Obama has virtually 100% chance of winning in the state of Connecticut, and Romney has 100% chance of winning in Texas. So there's no point for them to campaign in those states. Okay, so what are some of the other things that can go wrong? There could be a tie. It could be a 269-269 tie, or there might not be a majority. That will not happen in this election because there's no significant third-party candidate, but it could be a tie, albeit unlikely. If that happens, it goes to the House of Representatives. Each state only gets one vote. So every member of the delegation from each state has to decide how they're going to cast their vote, whether it be for the Republican or the Democratic president. And that can be tricky if the states are divided. The Senate then determines the vice president. So what could possibly happen in this election is if the House is continued to be controlled by the Republicans, they might choose Mitt Romney, and the Senate, if it's controlled by the Democrats, they might choose Joe Biden. So you could have a Romney-Biden presidency. That's incredibly unlikely, but with the way the system works, it could happen. Okay, the Electoral College winner can also lose the popular vote, which has happened 4 times. 1824, 76, 88, and then of course, as we know, in 2000 with President Bush. Some people are thinking that that could happen with Romney, that he might win the popular vote and Obama win the Electoral College vote. And there's so many factors that it's really hard to know, especially with the hurricane affecting probably turnout in New York and New Jersey. So there could be some interesting changes with that. Okay, there's a thing called a faithless elector, because the electors, they pledge to vote for the candidate that they say they will vote for. But the thing that's important is that they are not bound by federal law or the Constitution to do this. Some states have particular laws, but there's not a lot of enforcement, and the electors can choose whom they want to vote for. And it's like I said, incredibly rare. Really, the only time I know of a specific example was in 1976. There was an elector for Ford, and he cast his ballot for Ronald Reagan, who was not running in 1976 at that time, but he was obviously a big Reagan fan and decided to cast his ballot. It didn't affect the outcome of the election, but there was that one time. However, in 2000, the outcome was 271 votes for George Bush, 266 for Al Gore. So if 4 electors who had pledged to vote for Bush had decided to vote for Al Gore because he won the popular vote, then Al Gore would have been elected president. That's obviously unlikely because, as I said, they're pledged and they're partisan and they're highly committed to their party, but 4 people could have changed their minds out of the millions of votes that were cast in 2000, and it could have changed the outcome. Okay, so how can it be changed? If you want to abolish it, it would require a constitutional amendment. And the question is, what would replace it? And that's not something we're going to discuss right now, but it's a little bit tricky. There's no good answers. A nationwide vote would not be easy. It's really hard. And like I said, you could have a nationwide recount like we had in Florida in 2000. And then the other option is states could end the winner-take-all system and make it proportional so that Romney might win some votes in Connecticut and Obama might win some votes in Connecticut, as opposed to them all just automatically going to Obama because he's going to win, and same thing in Texas. So that could be a good solution. Okay, some other sort of crazy things. According to the statistician Nate Silver, Ohio has a 49.5% chance of being the tipping point state in the election. So this is obviously going to be very, very close. And then the next state is Virginia at 14.1. So Ohio is really the state to watch. Florida is also going to be really, really close. And as you can see, I put a prediction up there, and that's just based on recent polling. But so many of these states that are really close are, 51 right now for Obama, 49 for Romney, and those are, in many cases, 2 to 3 percentage points within the margin of error. So it's going to be very, very close. And this prediction, 303 to 235, is closer than it was in the last election. So it could just take a couple states, 1 or 2 states, to change, and it could be a completely different ballgame. But that's it. Thank you.
give another round of applause to Ms. Ryan. That was a great presentation. Okay, who's ready for the main event? Ooh. Okay, so first I'd like to introduce people who will be representing President Obama and Vice President Joe Biden, Olivia Taylor Butler and Cash Griffith. And next, representing Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan, we've got Peter Britton and Lee Pryor. And moderating the debate to be will be Mr. Greg Hawes.
Welcome to the fifth and final presidential debate. I'm your moderator, Candy Crowley. In accordance with presidential debate rules, the audience must remain quiet until the debate is over. We had a hypothetical coin toss ahead of time. Governor Romney won the coin toss. The first question will be for him. Governor, you stated that your tax plan will make the Bush tax cuts permanent and also cut taxes by 20% across the board. You have asserted that you will pay for these tax cuts with the unspecified closing of tax loopholes and unspecified spending cuts. Why should the American people trust you with the presidency if you won't trust them with the specifics of your tax plan? You have 1 minute to respond.
Thank you. Now, believe it or not, but I have 25 years of experience in the private sector, and I've helped found many successful businesses. You may know some of them: Bain Capital, Staples, Sports Authority. And yes, Mr. President, I did build those. Now, looking forward, there have been 4 major across-the-board tax cuts in history, starting with President Coolidge, moving on to Democratic President John F. Kennedy, and also Reagan and Bush. Now, I feel as if I need to break it down because there aren't many people out there who can seem to grasp this. A decrease in taxes generates more economic activity. More economic activity generates the greater need for workers. The greater need for workers results in more people entering into the workforce. When people are returning to work,
1 minute.
There's an increase in the number of taxpayers. When there's an increase in the number of taxpayers, then the government revenue goes up. This isn't a debate, these are the facts. President Obama has failed. 23 million Americans are struggling to find work. 15% of Americans are living in poverty today. This is not what a real recovery looks like. The idea that we could borrow $831 billion and spend it all on special interest groups is not working. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor Romney.
Do we start? Okay. So first I'd like to reply to some of the points that Governor Romney has made. First of all, the Bush tax cut, believe it or not, if you want me to break it down, have an underlying policy giving tax breaks to the rich and giving lower tax breaks to the lower and middle class. Thus, the rich and those who are more economically sufficient might get better benefits. But it also fails to spur growth. And you can see that from the Bush tax cuts when it happened and ended in 2010 when the recession started to begin. Also, Governor Romney talks about how we have a greater demand for workers, we have a greater demand for jobs, and we have a greater demand because 15 million people are in poverty. The Obama administration has done its best to create jobs and will continue to try and create jobs in the status quo if we are reelected, while Mitt Romney, under some of his companies, take for example Bain Capital, took his jobs to China and abroad to other places. How does that show loyalty to the American people? Thank you.
Speaking of jobs, Mr. President, unemployment remains high at around 7.8%. It is especially tough for minorities and young people to find jobs. And yet, these two groups are important parts of the coalition that elected you 4 years ago. Why should they vote for you again?
Well, it's actually a really good question, but 7.8% of unemployment as a high is not an accurate statement because during the Obama administration, if you look at the facts, it's actually an all-time low. When we inherited office in 2008, it was a 6.8% tax 6.8% unemployment rate, while by the time we were able to eliminate the Bush tax cuts from previous years and enact the American Job Act in September of 2011, it had already risen to 9%. But under the bill that we passed, it lowered to 8.1%, and during the second bill that we passed in April of 2012, it lowered to the status quo September 2012 to 7.8%. So it's actually an all-time low for the Obama administration. But we also want to focus on how to prevent this from happening again. So the Obama administration has put in measures to prevent this from happening. Take, for example, that we've invested in educational quality. We've made college more affordable for minorities and non-minorities. We've given funds to 5,000 of the lowest performing schools for better and safer learning environments. We've also to the question about why they should vote for us again, let's take, for example, the Obama administration has given tax cuts to companies who create jobs, who invest in cleaner energy, who give higher wages, and cut tax cuts to companies who take their jobs abroad to places like China and Japan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And regardless of what problems you may have inherited from the previous administration, after entering office for 42 straight months, unemployment was over 8%. Now, 9.9% of Hispanics are currently unemployed. African Americans are seeing numbers at 13.4%, and 50% of college graduates cannot find a job right now. Where's the job growth you promised 4 years ago? Where's the surge in the economy that we were promised to see? Where is the change that you guaranteed? Why should these minorities and the population of the entire country turn to you and trust you when you've been given 4 years, yet you haven't kept your promises? It's frustrating to watch as the economy continues to go down despite very impressive growth recently. But at the same time, it is a matter that minorities and the entire population cannot trust you when you are unable to keep the promises that you made 4 years ago.
Thank you, Governor. You mentioned Hispanics. During the primaries, you said that you supported the Arizona immigration law. One of your top immigration consultants helped write the law. You also said that you would make immigrants want to self-deport. Do you believe that there is a solution to our immigration issues that does not involve somehow legitimizing the millions of immigrants who came here illegally, but have been lawful and productive members of our society since their arrival?
Thank you, and yes, I do. There is a way in which we can decrease illegal immigration. We need to discourage illegal immigration, and I have several policies that will do so. I want to enact mandatory employment verification system in which employers will be required to hire legal immigrants and therefore will discourage illegal immigrants want to work in our job force. As governor, I vetoed in-state tuition for illegal immigrants, and I opposed driver's license for illegal immigrants. That is because illegal immigrants are not United States citizens. Why should one individual have to pay taxes and have another reap the benefits while not paying the same cost? Now, we also have to encourage legal immigration. We need to have open doors to individuals who earn advanced degrees. Lawful immigrants make up 8% of our population. However, 16% of our top performing companies have CEOs and officials from 25% of the original 8%. Now, looking forward, your question has a flaw. You ask how we can have them stay here because they've been lawful citizens or lawful members of society. However, I would like to remind the American people
Governor.
that it is illegal to be in the country illegally, and therefore it cannot be viewed as a lawful member of society.
Thank you, Governor.
Thank you, Mr. Oz.
Rebuttal.
Governor Romney makes a good point. Yes, it is illegal to be in the country illegally, but in Romney states in his Arizona address on February 22nd of 2012 that this plan for self-deportation of immigrants was something that he would far stretch to the entirety of America. Now, this wouldn't work at all because, as you see, Arizona has an immigration rate of 14%, high above the national average, actually double to America's national average of 7%. And so instead, you need to find a way in which tax cuts can create jobs for those who stay here and eliminate those for people who are obviously here illegally. Take, for example, the Obama administration. In the last rebuttal, we talked about how we would enact jobs by creating tax cuts for companies who would obviously give higher wages to people because of the economic status, and who would also give tax breaks to people who...
1 minute.
Oh, thank you. And give tax breaks to people who would create more jobs, create better wages, and invest in things that are good for America rather than focusing on something like that. Thank you.
Excuse me, if I may interject for one moment, it's interesting.
You'll have a chance to speak in a moment, Governor.
Can't do that in this kind of debate.
Mr. President,
Thank you.
Excuse me, Mr. President.
Thank you. You're done.
Mr. President.
It's very interesting to look. It's very interesting to look at the president's campaign when Eric Holder has sued the state and local government officials for trying to deport illegal immigrants. Thank you very much.
Excuse me, Governor. Excuse me, Governor. Please have respect for this kind of debate. If you cannot be a political man and have self-respect for a debate like this, please don't participate.
You should give those pointers to Vice President Joe Biden.
Mr. President, you came to Washington vowing to change the tone. Instead, partisanship is higher than ever. Whoever wins the White House is likely to face a divided Congress. After 2 years of failing to enact your agenda, why should that change in 2013 should you win? And if it won't change, why re-elect you?
Okay. Thank you. Also, for the first point, partisanship, I do agree, has been on a high, but you have to understand in retrospect, it has been on a high and it's been on the rise since 1987 when the middle class and the lower class began to experience gaps. And it also accelerated in 2007 before I took office. Also, 71% of Republicans versus 58% of Democrats say that their party has not done a sufficient job of addressing this issue. But the Democrats, there's still hope because the Democrats really do want to work with Republicans. Take, for example, the Obama administration wants to use the Romney Plan from 2007. Also, I and Chris Christie of New Jersey, we're working together to provide relief for those people affected by Hurricane Sandy in the last couple of days. In June 2012, the Senate passed a new farming bill which allowed $1 trillion over the next 10 years to stimulate jobs, to reduce deficits, and to cut insufficiencies. So it shows that the Democrats and the Republicans can work together to do good. It's all a matter of how the two parties react to each other. And so if the Obama administration is reelected, we will be able to bring the parties together more. Thank you.
It's interesting that you bring up the idea of partisanship when, after your initial election, you had 2 years in which the Democrats, had the majority in both the House and Senate. And yeah, it's extremely confusing how even with the majority, you were unable to pass any legislation that established any positive outcome. I mean, if you look at it, I, in Massachusetts, faced an 85% Democrat legislation. However, I worked across the aisle, which Obama is now unable to accomplish, and I passed my reform in which Massachusetts went from billions of dollars in deficit to $2 billion in surplus. Now, I think that one primary example is Scott Brown. Now, he was elected in a state heavily dominated by Democrats, and consequently, the voice of the people was finally heard when he was elected, not to mention in 2010, when the people elected a conservative and Republican majority in the House. Now, it's interesting that you try to, reach this area in which you can kind of try to dominate, but the facts do not support your claims. So, thank you.
Governor, at your convention, you made a joke about President Obama wanting to address global warming. In the wake of an historically unusual late October hurricane, do you still believe climate change worthy of jokes?
Thank you, Mr. Oz. However, you are wrong. There is a half-truth to that, and I applaud you for that, but let me start by clarifying my actual statement. I stated President Obama promised to begin to slow the rise of oceans and to heal the planet. My promise is to help you and your family. Now, environmental protection is a key to the success of our nation. And I was not joking about climate change. I was making fun of Obama and his failed attempts at trying to save the world. Most famously, his inefficient and failed funding for Solyndra, in which the president gave the renewable energy company $527 million of hard paying taxes on illegal U.S. citizens. Then they filed for bankruptcy. I find it extremely insulting that in our current economic climate, Obama wasted $527 million taxpayers' dollars. Environmental action is crucial, but America must first decrease the deficit so that it may allocate resources to green initiatives that will not lose taxpayer dollars. And let me tell you, Mr. President, you cannot blame Bush for your failed investments in green energy.
Rebuttal?
Okay, well, that's a bunch of wonderful statements from someone who's supposed to be politically correct and mature. But anyway, let's go to the facts.
Thank you.
Fact one that is true. Hurricane Sandy was real. I'm pretty sure everyone in here has experienced it and knows that it was not just some fake thing that Obama was trying to throw money after. But a Republican, Governor Chris Christie of New Jersey, has actually praised the work that I did with him for helping to save relief. So Governor Romney talks about how he wants to help families. Well, does Obama not do that by do I not do that by providing relief? Obama speaks in third person, sorry. He says that I have a bunch of failed attempts to bail out companies. He also mentioned illegal immigrants, which does not have anything to do with a hurricane. I'm pretty sure illegal immigrants didn't shove it up to us, so that doesn't really have anything to do with it.
That's true.
And so Obama has not failed to provide relief and has not failed to invest in certain companies. And just because one company went bankrupt, in total it was 5% rather than the 50 he thinks it is. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a very good point. But
Our final question. Our final question. President Obama, the financial crisis started in the housing market, and that sector continues to be weak. Why hasn't your administration done more to alleviate the housing crisis?
Well, unfortunately, no one can really answer that question. Why doesn't anybody do more to do anything? The Obama administration has done its best to try and fix the housing market, but unfortunately, it is not a process that can be fixed in 4 years, nor any of the real problems that you have under an administration. But we can say with confidence that the Obama administration has done the best it can to try and help improve these housing markets. And we do have a plan that we have enacted and that will continue to work. Take, for example, it will change the system by putting in terms that new homeowners can understand, so there is not the people who own houses and the people who are selling them can be on the same rate, rather than putting in all these clauses and all these things that end up screwing them over in the long run. Excuse my language. And also, we also want to regulate by making the 200,000 available houses who have been foreclosed on available for rent. So that will also help people at least be in homes and have a way to steadily live rather than having to invest in buying a home. Also, we want to allow house owners to refinance more easily, which will save them $3,000 a year on average. So this plan will work and has worked, and so it's steadily recovering the market. Thank you.
Governor Romney.
Mr. President, you say that you and your administration have been trying your best, but I guess your best just isn't good enough. You are fiscally irresponsible, and interest rates are at an all-time low. The situation cannot get much worse. There is no confidence in the housing market, and there is not enough job growth to give consumers the confidence they need in investing in a home. We, as a country, need to increase the money in your pockets and therefore increase the confidence that you have in the housing market. We need a situation in which growth is not only going up for employment and the economy, but specifically the housing market. Otherwise, your administration's failed attempts will end up resulting in the same effects seen in Europe, most commonly in Greece. Now, my 5-point plan will cause a surge in confidence and money in the citizens' pockets. Now, I urge you to get out and vote for Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan, among other Republicans, because the country cannot afford another 4 more years at an administration trying its best but not getting the results that they promised. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This concludes the debate. Thank you especially to Vice President Biden and Congressman Ryan for showing up today.
Thank you.
And thank you, and vote next week, please.